The average AI engineering salary jumped $50,000 in a single year, from $156,000 to $206,000. And LinkedIn just ranked AI engineer as the #1 fastest growing job in the entire United States, with job postings up 143% year over year. Now, if you've been thinking about getting into AI engineering, or you're already in it and you're wondering what you should be making, this video is going to break down exactly what to expect from entry level, from junior, all the way to senior and beyond. So let's dive right in with our junior or entry level salaries, which is typically between 0 to 2 years of experience. Now, the base salary for this range is anywhere from $115,000 to $150,000. Again, this is on average, depends where you live. Now, the total compensation here, if you include bonuses, stock, etc., can be up to $173,000 on average in North America specifically. And that's something to keep in mind. I'm mostly talking about the US here. If we're going into other markets, more developing nations, of course, it's going to be a lot lower, but I'm talking about kind of big tech and most jobs you're going to see in the US. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that entry level here, specifically in AI, is a little bit misleading. And that's because most roles still expect a CS degree, some machine learning coursework, or even a master's degree. And if you don't have that, they're expecting that you at least have some development experience before you walk in to just become an AI engineer with no prior experience. So you're really not starting from zero here. You're starting with an existing skill set, or at least some credentials in the field from a university, for example. Now, here's kind of a crazy stat that I found. Junior AI engineers in North America averaged $173,500 total compensation in 2025, which actually exceeded some director level averages of $152,000 at certain target companies. Now, the market, especially now, really values this skill set, which is why they're paying so much. But again, keep in mind, entry level is not really truly entry level. Now, let's talk about what junior AI engineers are actually expected to do. We're talking about data cleaning, model prototyping, testing models, specifically under senior guidance, basic pipeline work, so creating like an ML pipeline, and then maybe a little bit of deployment, but usually that's going to be reserved for the next level, which is mid-level. Okay, so we talked about the junior level already. Now let's get into mid-level, where we have a base salary range of anywhere from $155,000 to $220,000 per year. Now, this area is where we're seeing the steepest growth. For example, MRJ Recruitment showed that there was an approximately 9% year-over-year growth for engineers with 3 to 5 years of hands-on ML experience, which is the highest of any of the experience bands here: junior, mid-level, senior, etc. You guys get the idea. Now, why is that the case? Well, these are the people who can actually ship production models without someone looking over their shoulder. But they don't cost what, for example, a staff engineer costs, and every company wants them. So what that means is that at the mid-level, there's a ton of companies hiring here with really not enough supply. So if you're someone who's a talented mid-level AI engineer, you can demand higher salaries, and companies will still pay it because you're not at the 400, 500, 600K range. You're at kind of that low to mid 200 range. Now, with that in mind, if we talk about total compensation, especially including equity, bonuses, etc., you can easily surpass over $250,000 in this range, especially with base salaries that are kind of in the high 100s. Now, here is where specialization also starts to pay off. So a lot of times companies are going to be looking for LLM integrations, ML ops, retrieval augmented generation, cloud platform experience, right? All of those can demand a slightly higher salary. Now, in terms of what you're actually expected to do, you're going to be working independently on production AI systems, integrating LLMs into real applications, and then obviously collaborating across teams. This is going to include everything you do as a junior or entry level, but then actually getting this out into production. And I think that's the key piece here. How do you deploy something, scale it, and get it working in a real environment, not just in a notebook? So if you're watching this right now and thinking, okay, I want to get into AI engineering, or I want to level up from where I am right now, maybe get to a mid-level developer, the question becomes, how do you actually build these skills in a structured way? Now, that's where Datacamp comes in, and I've partnered with them for this video. Now, Datacamp has learning tracks that map directly to the roles that we've been talking about, and I've personally used them for years to sharpen my own Python and AI skills. Now, the one that I'd start with is their Associate AI Engineer for Developers track. It teaches you how to integrate AI into real software applications using APIs and open source libraries. And if you've been paying attention, that's literally the job description for most AI engineering roles now. It's not theory, it's the applied stuff that companies actually want to see. Now, if you're coming from more of a data science background, they have an associate AI engineer for data scientist track that bridges the gap between analytics and building AI-powered applications. And if you're a total beginner who needs to start from scratch, you can check out the AI fundamentals track to build that foundation first. Now, what I like about Datacamp is you're not just watching the lectures. You're writing code directly in the browser, working on real projects, and you can earn certifications that you can put on your resume or LinkedIn. Now, when we just talked about how companies are desperate for people with hands-on AI deployment skills, this is one of the fastest ways to build that proof. Datacamp has been a long-term partner of the channel. Because of that, you can get 25% off any track using my link in the description. Now, let's move to the next section, which is senior or lead engineers. Now, at this point, we're talking about 7+ years of experience. Sometimes you can get there sooner, but usually, you're well into your career. Now, for AI engineers here, you could be getting paid anywhere from $200,000 to $312,000 per year as a base salary, again, mostly in the United States. And obviously, this can go much higher if we talk about total compensation, where many engineers here are easily clearing $400,000 plus when we include equity, bonuses, stock grants, all of that extra stuff. Now, if we talk about specific companies, so like FANG companies or some of the frontier AI labs out there, the total compensation can get even crazier. If we look at a Google L6 AI engineer, that's $285,000 in base salary approximately, plus $350,000 in annual stock grant. That's putting us over $600,000 in total annual compensation, and I personally know people that make much more than that with less years of experience. If we look at something like OpenAI, we can see that they're actually paying engineers over $900,000 per year, but that's usually for the best of the best that have PhDs, publications, and have worked at some of the top companies before with lots of experience. Now, things start to really vary at this level, so take what I say with a grain of salt. The one source I found, Core One, placed a senior AI engineer last quarter at a $275,000 base pay plus $100,000 in equity at well-known companies. So we're talking about $375,000 in total compensation, and that is definitely not an outlier, but it could be kind of on the upper end when we're talking outside of FANG. So if you're working for a non-FANG company, of course, it's going to be lower compensation, but you still can easily be clearing above $300,000. Now, at this level, you're not just building models, you're designing systems, mentoring junior developers, managing teams, hiring people, right? Making architectural decisions that affect the entire product line and maybe even the entire company. You're really in charge of a lot, and your decisions are probably being tied to revenue or the bottom line to justify a lot of the compensation that you're getting. Now, another interesting stat here is that 42% of senior AI specialists now receive more than half of their total compensation through equity or token grants. So keep that in mind. The base salary is really not what we're paying attention to here. We're looking at the overall total compensation, which can come in a lot of different forms. Okay. So with all of that said, that gives us a general guideline on the money we can make in AI engineering. And the key thing is that it starts really high and it can just go to insane values where you could be one of those Meta employees making $100 million in a 3 or 4 year contract. We really don't know because it depends on where you live, the company that you're working for, etc. But I want to talk about what typically is going to move the needle on pay specifically. Now, first, specialization, right? So if you're a specialist in LLM, generative AI, you're probably going to be paid more than just a standard machine learning engineer. Now, of course, location is going to matter a ton as well. You're going to get paid the most if you're in the top areas in the United States, even if you're working remotely, as long as the headquarters is there, like San Francisco Bay Area, of course, that's going to pay the highest. Then we have Seattle and New York City, which are coming up kind of second and third. So a few other tech hubs out there, for example, Austin is a big one. There's a few other areas in the United States, but generally speaking, you want to be in, well, the most expensive places to live that just pay the highest salaries because that's kind of where the whole tech hub is. If we move over to Europe, the salaries get slashed massively. We're talking probably over 50%. And same thing even in Canada, where I used to live, where you could be offered the exact same position just in a Canadian office with literally half the pay. So generally speaking, you want to make a lot of money, go to the US, go to San Francisco, go to New York, go to all of these tech hubs. That's where you're going to get the most amount of money. Now, the company stage here also matters a lot. If you're working for a frontier lab, Anthropic, OpenAI, you're going to get paid the most. Then we probably go down to FANG companies. Then we're looking at like late stage startups, right, that have raised a lot of money already. And then probably from there, we're going to enterprises and then to early stage startups in terms of where you can expect the most amount of money. In fact, what I've seen is usually a lot of these enterprisey type companies, like a bank, for example, they can still pay well, but they're generally not, cracking into $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 per year. here, where when you talk about an OpenAI or a Google or a Facebook, it is feasible that you could make over $1 million working there as an AI engineer. And again, I personally know people who have done that. Now, one thing to consider as well is that if you're getting equity in something like a startup, which might be a lot of your compensation, that's very speculative. Whereas if you're getting RSUs in a big tech company, that's effectively cash in terms of its liquidity. So keep that in mind. Now, like we talked about before, and many of you already know, make sure you're looking at the total compensation, not just the base compensation, because you could have an offer with a lower base salary, but a much higher total comp if that's coming in bonus, grants, performance, whatever, right? And then lastly, if we talk about skills that are commanding the highest premiums right now, we have LLM integration, ML ops, RAG architecture, cloud platform experience, vector databases, a few other ones, but those are generally where you're going to get paid the most compared to just implementing a logistic regression algorithm with basic machine learning skills. Now, there are obviously unlimited factors to what affects compensation, but hopefully that gives you a general idea, because now I want to talk about how you can actually get into this field. Now, the main thing that you may have noticed at this point is that the gap here isn't actually in AI knowledge, it's an AI deployment experience. Companies want engineers who can take powerful models and turn them into real production systems. So being able to demonstrate that you have systems knowledge, that you can build real projects, that you can scale, and that you can work outside of a demo environment or a notebook is what's going to speak volumes here and get you to those higher tiers. Now, again, some key skills to look at here. Python, obviously you need to know that, then LLM integration, ML ops and deployment, cloud platforms, RAG architecture, as we discussed. Look into that and make sure that you understand that the AI engineering role is distinct from just ML engineering. ML engineers are building and training models. AI engineers are deploying and integrating these models, typically building LLM-powered apps, shipping AI features, and they're really on that kind of practical side of AI, where it's not only theoretical, it's actually how do we build a system around this? And that's where a lot of other software engineering skills come in. You pretty much have to be just a back-end engineer who happens to know a bunch of AI to get an AI engineering role. Now, I want to leave you with this here. These salary numbers I mentioned are real, but they obviously skew towards the top market and the top companies. A mid-level AI engineer at a mid-sized company might be making, $130,000 or $160,000 per year, and that's still an excellent salary, but of course it's going to be a lot different than if you worked at Google in San Francisco. Now, if we talk about entry level, that's also kind of a bit of a joke in this field. You're not really ever entry level. You still need the skills. You're just kind of starting within AI engineering. So this is not something you're going to do in 2 or 3 months. This is something that's going to be probably 1, 2, 3 year adventure to be able to get in and make the kind of money that we're talking about. Now, look, if you're someone who has a strong background already and you want to maximize your earning potential, I would strongly suggest shifting into this field. This is still early, even though it might not feel like it to get into this. And the more experience you can gain, the more money that you're going to make. So anyways, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here. Let me know what you think. Are you bullish on the future of AI engineering? Comment down below, and I will see you in another video.